Hi, this is a demo of the infrastructure team's work this fall, 2019. We're working on, as a team, a couple different projects. One is the web archiving system is receiving a new application for scheduling and other tasks that a web archiving manager needs to perform. I'm not going to talk about that in this demo video. The other work that is being done is sort of general updates and feature enhancements to various parts of the accessioning infrastructure and SDR, things like Argo and Preassembly and the robots and so on. And I am going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've done in the last few weeks. And then there'll be another demo video at the end of the work cycle with the rest of the work that we've done. Just to point out, this work that I'm going to describe in this demo video is not comprehensive. It's just some highlights of the most visible changes. We've been sending out emails once a week that have more details about the rest of the work that's being done. Okay, so let's start in Argo. Some of the new features that we've added are moving some things that used to be under this bulk update section into the bulk actions. And just as a reminder, bulk update had some limitations in terms of the number of objects that could be operated on before you would start experiencing timeouts or errors. Bulk actions is better able to do the jobs in the background, and so it can work with much larger sets of objects. And so we've moved over the ability to open and close large groups of objects. So under bulk actions, if you go to create a new bulk action now, what you'll find is that we have prepare objects, which really means open them for versioning, and close, which is sort of the opposite. It works very similar as before. You can get a list of druids from your previous search and then describe what you're doing with them. And obviously, depending on what you're doing, if you're opening it, you can choose the type just like you would if you were opening a single object, and closing, it would just use what it was set and open. So that's the big change, is being able to open and close a larger number of objects before the limit was somewhere around 500. There's also some other small changes, like the labels are a little bit more descriptive about what you're doing. For example, you're describing the version, or you're describing why you're performing this bulk action. Just for some, this will actually go into the version of the objects. This is really for informational purposes for auditing. So those are sort of a couple of the major changes in Argo. There's some other stuff upcoming, which we'll talk about later. For example, being able to create these virtual objects like an atlas from many objects. We'll have the ability to do that in Argo soon as well. Talking about that virtual merge, or what's currently called virtual merge or combinator, the ability to create a sort of a virtual object that consists of a set of child objects that are bundled together. That script was broken for a while. It's now fixed, so we can at least continue with that. And as I just mentioned, there's work underway to move that capability into Argo to make it sort of usable by an end user without needing a developer to run a script. Okay, so I think that's what I'm going to talk about for Argo. Let's jump over to Preassembly. Preassembly is the application that's used for accessioning content. And it previously supported certain types like images and books. There's a couple changes that occurred here. One is this used to be called sample SMPL for the media preservation lab, but that was a little bit too specific because there's other users that potentially could have the need for accessioning media content like video or audio. This is really multimedia. So we did some renaming, and this touched a number of points in the code, not just this drop-down menu. There's also some file names that are expected to be different, but basically a rebranding of sample to media just to make it more general usage. And then the other one that you'll see in this menu is this 3D option. So we now have the capability of accessioning 3D objects creating all the appropriate content metadata that's needed to have these objects appear in the Perl page correctly. So this is all new in Preassembly. There's also some behind the work scene that improves some error messaging. So when you start a job, if it failed, you'll get a better clue as to what happened. And lastly, we now have added the capability to re-accession objects. And what this means is if you had previously accessioned an object and then discovered you really just needed to replace the files, and you run an accessioning job again for the same druids, it would look like it was working, but then it would generate kind of downstream errors, these version mismatch errors. We've now added some capability to so that it detects that you're trying to accession an existing object, what we call a re-accession, and it will properly version them before it creates the new data, so that you don't get a version mismatch error later. There's nothing you'll see in the user interface because this detection happens automatically, but that is now in there as well. Lastly, I guess I'll just mention that some of the other work that's ongoing that is not visible in any user-facing apps is some just internal refactoring of various error messaging between applications, which will make hopefully debugging faster and surfacing better error messages. And there's also some work ongoing in what we're calling SDR evolution, which is sort of making bits of the infrastructure a little bit better and more isolated. So as we decide to replace or upgrade different components, we can do it in a more isolated way without having to touch many parts of the infrastructure at once. So that work is also kind of happening, although it may not be as visible. Okay, so that is the demo video. And thanks to everyone on the infrastructure team, and to Naomi who's the tech lead, and to everyone else who's been working on this project. And we'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks.